Hey there guys, and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking all about how you can fix your lower back pain. We're going to go through some real key principles in both the early stages and then as we go through our recovery to make sure we can fix our back pain more effectively. So we're going to break it down in a lot of detail and then go through some of the things on the whiteboard behind me to really drill it down, get it in your head as to what you need to do to fix your back pain from home. Hopefully you guys are going to find this full of tons of information and really help give you that clarity in moving forwards. With that being said, let's get into today's topic. So if you are new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. We do these live streams and upload videos to our channel, and that's the best way for you guys to be made aware of when we do release a new video or go live. And today, logging on to our YouTube, we've hit the 2,000 subscriber marker. So thank you to every single one of you guys that do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hopefully you guys get the real value out of the content. So with that being said, I thought for today's live stream, we'll cover really just a little overview of back pain, including sciatica, those sorts of things, very, very quickly, and then get into the nuts and bolts of what we need to be doing, because I think it'll really help you guys better understand how we can move forward, because all too often there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of confusion around on the internet, and really by distilling this into something that you can follow in a step-by-step process, it should really give you the confidence to get your back fixed. And we know it works for many of the guys in our Back in Shape program. It's just helping you guys get through that, especially in the early days. So we are going to spend a little bit longer focusing around what we call sort of phase 1 stroke phase 2 of this, because that's, I think, where people really do struggle the most, because there's just that uncertainty, that lack of confidence as well. So first and foremost, in terms of our back pain, how do we get back pain? It's really going to be, in the majority of cases, it's a compression. It's generally going to be a repetitive strain of some description, although often there's a one-off event, a trigger, if you will, putting the socks on in the morning, putting your child in the car seat, those sorts of things that will cause it to occur. But then we go and get an MRI, we get an X-ray, and we go, wow, there's been something going on in here for a little while, that hasn't been there overnight. And we start to see that maybe some of these issues we've got have built up over a period of time below the radar, and it's only when we have that final little tweak that it really becomes a problem. And if we just deal with back pain as a result of that little tweak, then we can get into quite a little hole, quite a little bit of a rut, if you will, because we think, well, I only put my socks on, why is my back pain now been here for 6 weeks and I've got sciatica down the leg, for example. But if we actually understand back pain better and say, do you know what? I've been slouching in my chair for the last 20 years. I don't exercise enough. Lockdown maybe for the last 6 months has meant I've been working from home and doing next to no exercise. I'm not fit and able to protect my core. No wonder my back hasn't been through that natural healing process, or been able to go through that natural healing process. And that's really where we need to start. We need to understand the problem as best as possible. And therefore, if we understand that it's that compression, and generally speaking, when we have disc bulges, those discs will bulge towards the back of the spine, maybe creating some inflammation or direct contact on some of those nerves, giving us those back pain symptoms or symptoms down the leg, which might be referred to as sciatica. Once we understand that, we can start filtering exercises. Most of us, and in our experience in the clinic looking at imaging, we have too little curve. There's a flattening of our lordosis. We, instead of being stood up like so with a nice curve in our lower back, we spend so much of our day in this position here on the computer or on the couch, our legs propped up, really rounding that lower back, weakening all of those structures that are there to provide support and integrity to the lumbar spine. So when we do then bend for that final time before the back goes, we really do feel it, because we've just stretched out all those structures. And quite often people will gravitate to the very first exercise they do, which is pulling those knees towards the chest to stretch out that back even more. And we've discussed this on the last 148 live streams that we've done, and all the other videos on our YouTube channel. We've discussed why you guys shouldn't be doing that, and all too often why you are doing those activities, because they open out the spaces where the nerves are and it feels nice. But the problem is it's invariably making the situation worse, and we don't want to be doing anything that's going to make the situation worse. So that brings us to the actual process itself of getting your back fixed from home and doing some of these principles. And the reality is, even if you came, say, to the clinic to see us for treatment, and we've got some awesome treatment there, we've got the IDD table for spinal decompression, we've got the class 4 laser, we've got the vibration therapy, we've got all of these which are put together into arguably the most comprehensive treatment approach, non-invasive, for back pain. Even if you came and did that, you're still going to have to do these things behind me. So don't wait and say, hey, I can't see anyone, I'm not going to do any rehab, I'm not going to do any exercises. Because we have people from all sort of spectrums, the minor back pain to some of these more serious variations where we have more bony damage and maybe more disc damage, all able to go through this process as long as they do it correctly. Now, with a caveat on this is that, or the caveat is that to the degree that you have a more severe diagnosis, maybe you've got more degenerative change in your spine, maybe we've got some other bony issues in the spine, to the degree you have those issues, you will not be able to get away with bad technique. But all too often you've got those issues because we haven't had the support for our spine for a very long period of time. And that's where people get caught out. They just don't have the support. They've got a bad issue and they can't do these activities correctly, or they struggle and then they shy away. And that's when we can start going down a very slippery slope, because we're not actually providing any support. So the first one on here is mastering the basics, bracing your core and learning how to properly stretch. If I'm doing a hamstring stretch like that, okay, to touch my toes, that's awful. But so many people do it. They don't have the ability to do that sort of stretch correctly, to stretch the hamstrings. You're stretching the back. Well, we discussed already not to do that. So if you do, for example, our phase 1 in the Back in Shape, and you do that sort of hamstring stretch, even though the videos say not to do that, you're going to hurt your back, or you're going to make your back worse. And then we go, oh, well, I can't do any exercises. No. And one of the big problems with back pain, especially when it becomes chronic, is the mental aspect. But if someone can then say to you, hey, you're bending your back when you do that, don't do that. It's making you worse. And you change it and you have success with that, you'll start to see that actually there is a little bit more hope. And the really important part, first and foremost here, alongside stretching correctly, is bracing the core, relearning how to engage that core effectively so that our spine doesn't wobble. We injure our spine when one of the joints moves a little bit further than it should do, and that's where it fails. And by being able to brace the spine effectively, we can bend forwards or backwards without the spine actually moving, bending from our hips instead. And we discussed hip hinge the other day on the live stream. So learning to actually engage the core is something that, for some people, we've seen them in the clinic, it takes them a couple of weeks to be able to do this correctly because we haven't done it for years. We sit down every single day at the office or at home or in the car or on the tube, and we don't actually get any real stimulation for these muscles. Maybe we've done some sit-ups, but that's not the right core. That makes it worse, so don't do that. That's very, very important. So learning to do this is really, really important. And the biggest problem then is that people sometimes, the next biggest problem is you master these exercises, you're doing them well, you say, oh, I feel better doing these. I'm maybe doing the towel exercise, which unloads the spine. And this is all in the Back in Shape program. This is what we call phase 1. We're doing these exercises correctly, but we just keep doing them. We fail to realize that these are relief-based exercises and they're educational-based exercises, they're technique-based exercises. And all too often we get people that have had the instruction from maybe their other physio or osteo or chiro, and they say do knee rocks. Rock your knees left and right. That's doing nothing for rehab. I mean, rocking your knees left and right, it's not, it really, the notion that that's a rehabilitation exercise is not rehabbing anything. You're rocking your knees left to right. It's like saying do that. There's nothing's happening there. We're just moving our spine, and maybe not in the best way, especially if we're in phase 1. So we cannot stay in here till kingdom come. The objective is to have a handle on these exercises as quickly as possible so we can move on to phase 2. But I've put it in red up here. Some people are really nervous about moving on. You've gone through rehab before and you've done some of these maybe sort of exercises, and then you've tried to go back into the gym, or you've tried to go and do some strengthening, and if it hurts and you've knocked back and then you've had a relapse, and we don't want to do that again because, well, last time I did it, it hurt. Well, that's if we're doing the wrong exercises. If you've just done this and we move into doing leg raises, or we're going to doing sit-ups or other aggressive exercises on a Swiss ball maybe, it's too soon. It's the wrong exercise for you guys to do, and maybe you have jumped ahead a little bit too far doing some of those incorrect exercises. So move forward tentatively, but do move forward. Stagnation is not an option when it comes to back pain. It really will lead you to getting into trouble. And we know this, firstly, we knew this already from clinical experience over the years, seeing people with their images, etc. But also in the Back in Shape, you've got more than enough people that go through this process and can even do some of the exercises to start with, but with perseverance and diligence, they can really make some massive improvements. It just takes a little bit of time and the confidence that actually we can maybe adjust some of these with regards to the technique to allow us to get into them. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So this second stage of recovery is going to be protecting your spine by building strength. It's doing this in a safe way and holding the spine and pelvis still, as I mentioned, learning to do here, in spite of it being pulled in different directions. For example, we miss a step. That's a common way for people in the early days to relapse their back. We miss a step and our body goes off to the side, and because we don't have the ability to brace our core as we're being thrown off to the one side, we strain one of those joints again, and lo and behold, we have another relapse. This is about learning to stop that from happening, having a reactive, strong core and learning to engage in spite of it being pulled off in different directions. And that's where some of those exercises come in. But sometimes that will be too difficult. Maybe we can't. I don't know where my little guy is. He's disappeared. The little model. But anyway, we can't lie on our back. If we can't lie on our back and move one of the legs without losing the engagement and our whole spine moving, we have a real issue. We have a real issue in competence of that core. So how on earth is your back going to be effectively supported as we stand you upright and we've got a big shoulder girdle wobbling around on the spine, going about our daily tasks? So learning to get to grips with these particular exercises is so very important, and with a bit of diligence and maybe breaking some of these exercises down into their constituent elements can really help you feed in to what we call phase 2, which is where you start making real change. That's where we start actually strengthening. So if you have a relapse in phase 2, which these things happen, maybe someone shunts you at the shops, maybe not right now because people aren't getting that close, but maybe you miss a step, you have a little relapse. You find that the further through phase 2 we go, the further through this period we go, the more strength we've built. And therefore, if we do have a little relapse, those relapses last less and less time. Our body bounces back quicker and quicker because some of that core strength has already been built. And that will start to happen in the first week or so, which is really, really a powerful thing. But we've got some tips for you in blue here as well. The first one is if you are one of those nervous people, you've had back pain for a long period of time where you struggle. Sometimes feeding in what we'd call phase 2 every other day can actually be a really helpful tool, and we've discussed this more in the Back in Shape about how you can do this in detail. You can break down those exercises with reduced range of motion. So the exercises that you're required to do, if we do them with less range of motion, there's less opportunity for deviation from the technique. So therefore, that's a nice strategy with lesser range to start with, so we can build out the technique and build out the range of motion as the weeks and days go by. And then finally, take your time. It's not a rush. All too often people see on our Back in Shape, they see that it says, 28 days or 30 days for this part. And they say, well, I've got to push through. And that's not the case. You're only competing against yourself, not everybody else. And we have to put the timer somewhere and make it most achievable for most people. But some of you guys doing these sorts of exercises will take a little bit longer to build up. Others of you will get through this phase 2 and these early strengthening exercises very, very quickly and move on to what we'd call phase 3. So it is a unique journey, and we have to have this through the lens of the history of our problem. How long have we had these things? How serious is the damage there? How have we been feeling? How many repeat attempts or repeat occurrences have we had of this back pain? And all those things will dictate how quickly we can or cannot move through this process. But every single one of you guys watching this video will be able to move through this process. I'm very, very sure of that. And then the final part, so we're going to skim over these bits because they're not really as relevant for you guys probably watching this video. But if you've got any questions, do post those in the comments below because we're coming towards the end of the of this particular part of the video. The challenge to build up those muscles and really building real protection for those muscles. This is where we start using resistance. We start adding in a degree of resistance to build and challenge those muscles in more advanced ways with more complex movements, challenging in unilateral ways, etc. Challenging those muscles to build up strength and really build a reservoir for compensation, to overcompensate maybe for some of the things in our spine that we cannot resolve completely. Maybe there's some degree of bony damage or degenerative change there that's not going to go away. So we use the resistance here to really build up above and beyond what's maybe considered to be quote unquote normal or average, so that we're more protected for the long term. That's a really, really important thing for any of you guys that have anything more than sort of a minor strain in the back. We want to overcompensate. Those muscles can do a better job. If they're a little bit stronger than the average, they can protect you more. And having a little bit of muscle soreness as we move into this phase, because some of the muscles up here are going to start to be worked on to really feed into the lower back, those upper back muscles, and some of the legs are going to be challenged a little bit more. So getting a little bit of soreness, of muscle soreness, the day after doing these sorts of workouts is actually rather normal. And sometimes people get thrown a little bit by that. Whoa, that was I'm pretty sore today in ways I haven't been before. And that's a sign your muscles are being challenged in the right sort of way. And you should find that actually looking back, going back to previous intensities, you're going to find that when you're doing your strengthening work, it's actually an awful lot easier to do some of those old intensities. Maybe you're on 5 sets of 10 and you try one day 3 sets of 10. You remember, 3 or 4 weeks ago, that was a real struggle, and now I just breeze through it, no effort at all. So you'll start to see the improvement, and that's a really nice thing to look back on, as well as looking forward to getting better. And the final note on flexibility: once we've got to the point where we've built a good degree of strength, we can start working on the flexibility. People tend to skip and focus on trying to improve their flexibility when they have no ability to control and protect their spine. And this is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. All too often people will come into the clinic and say, I'm doing my stretching, I'm doing my exercises, and all it is a bunch of stretching. And they've got no core stability, no strength in the legs or in the back muscles either. And they're trying to make everything more wobbly. And this creates real challenges in the individual. So that's pretty much it for me. We can move into Q&A.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, everybody. Please do keep your comments and your questions coming in. Sally says here, you mentioned confidence to progress. That's where the Premium Back in Shape group and the support you provide is key. When things don't feel good or you have a setback, advice and support makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I think the one thing we created with the Facebook group for the premium members, we knew that you could get on with this on your own, but it's so much easier to have someone there to say, hey, this is how you should do this, or hey, that's normal, or that's not normal, change that right now. These sorts of things. That is why we created that part of the Back in Shape program, because it's so much easier to help you guys avoid these errors than fall into the pitfalls and afterwards say, hey, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And leaving you guys to do it on your own. Sometimes having, and one thing we do notice is some people do just go away and do it on their own, and then they'll come back in 2 or 3 months and say, I'm doing okay, but this has happened. And we do think, like, you're in the Facebook group, why didn't you just ask a question 2 months ago? Like, the whole point of it being there is for people to get help and support. So please, if you are a member of the premium membership and you're going through the Back in Shape, do ask us. Don't leave it 2 or 3 weeks to go along with the process. And because maybe you're making some simple mistakes. I remember speaking to someone who'd been doing forward folds, forward bends the whole way through for 3 months.
Oh, no.
And I'm just thinking, goodness gracious me, you're doing the whole workout and then you're finishing with a forward fold. That's basically, we've discussed before, like trying to lose weight on a diet and having cake every evening. It's just not going to work. So remember, when it comes to back pain, you could do a lot of things right. You could follow this to the letter, but then if afterwards you go and do child's pose after you finish the towel, you're not going to be doing the right thing. You're going to be making it worse in spite of doing a lot of the right things. It's very, very important. Small issues can derail progress quite substantially, especially if they're the wrong things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Kate also agrees that I agree, Sally, and even the encouragement from the superb Facebook support group, it really helps knowing that you're not going through this alone. It reminds me of the mental health and back pain video that we did a while back. That was
really popular.
That was really popular because I think it is such a big
we've discussed we've discussed it time and time again about the fact that a lot of times, because back pain isn't necessarily visible to others, you do feel like you're kind of the only one suffering from that. And it's really, really warming to see that we've got some awesome members in the Back in Shape that really genuinely care about supporting one another as well, which really does give us a good degree of satisfaction actually seeing that, and that knowing that you're not alone is really, really important, I think, because it's not abnormal.
Absolutely.
It's not abnormal to go through some of these challenges. And once you see that there are others, it really, and others that are going through the same challenges, sometimes with the same diagnosis and the same obstacles, maybe with some variations, but they're still pushing on. It really is, I think, motivating.
Yeah. But thank you, Sally and Kate, for the
thanks,
really
guys.
lovely comments there. Sally's just gone on to say, she said, I'm a natural striver and taking my time, but being mindful of stagnation has been a challenge for me.
Yeah, it's always a fine line, a fine balance between not pushing and stagnating and pushing too hard and relapsing, and we have to tread a careful line sort of between those 2 points. to make sure that we don't overdo one side or underdo the other side. And that is a bit of an art, and it's a bit of a trial and error process. Sometimes we are going to overcook it, and the answer or the objective is that we don't overcook it too much when we do get those relapses or those kickbacks from a certain activity, and that we have some strategies like, for example, alternating days. If we're going to try something new, say we were going to go out and play golf, I know, or go to the driving range. I know there's a number of guys I've discussed on live calls before about, you know, their willingness to get into golf again, you know, and obviously knowing that that's a challenge if we've got a disc problem in the lower back. But, you know, go down the driving range for one day and then leave it a couple of days, go with your pitching wedges, and then a couple of days later, maybe 3-4 days later, you go down again, rather than going down one day and then the next day we're good and we have fun, and then the next day we pick out the driver, and then the fourth day we're in trouble again. So, you know, having that ability to just dampen our progress, especially when we start doing things that we enjoy, is a challenge, and a challenge that everyone, myself included, is guilty of. And I can think of someone else I know that is also guilty of this challenge, who is going down to get his pec looked at later today. So.
Absolutely. Right, Karen has asked here, if someone has been recommended surgery, is it too late for them to start these exercises and potentially avoid needing it?
I think we've seen enough people that have come through in the clinic with the options of surgery, and the general answer that I give to patients is they say, look, I don't want to have surgery, but I got it booked in 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever the case may be, and it's a case of, look, well, let's do some treatment, let's do the rehab, let's see where we can get you before the surgery, and you can decide not to have it at the last minute. And to be honest, I think the way in which surgeons are moving, they don't want you to have surgery. If you can do it yourself, then they'll be really, really pleased by that, and they will encourage you to go down that route, which is really good. But we see enough people that do these exercises and make progress and avoid the need for surgery afterwards. Some, they do end up having the surgery, but we discussed a little while ago, maybe last week, when we did the hip one, the hip replacement live stream, that the research shows that doing that rehab, doing the exercises before is a good thing. Don't just give up, because it'll decrease the likelihood of having a positive outcome, or you will not benefit from the likelihood of having a more positive outcome post-surgery if you do not do the rehabilitation beforehand. And I mean, the current climate with everything that's going on, if you're watching this, it's now mid-October 2020, with everything that's going on and the crazy strain on the health sector. I've spoken to a few people where they've said, oh, I couldn't have XYZ invasive procedure, whether it was injections or other bits and pieces, so I had to rely on the Back in Shape. And actually it looks like it was a really good thing that the circumstances stopped them being able to have that procedure, because they've actually moved on and made some real progress and not had to go under a more invasive procedure. That's almost forced people to have to deal with it from home and avoid some of these more invasive procedures that otherwise may have been booked for March, April time this year. And now you look at it and say, oh, well, I'm doing a good degree better, and I haven't had to have XYZ procedure. So I would say it's always a good idea to do the rehabilitation, as long as we understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what our diagnoses are. That's quite important.
Okay, awesome. Kate has asked a question here. She said, do you have any views on Qigong as an extra form of flexibility?
I do not know enough about Qigong. I'd imagine it sounds very similar to Tai Chi.
Yes, I think it's a form of Tai Chi.
And I think some of those activities can actually be really good from a meditation point of view. And from what I understand, it is a very relaxing, sort of slow pace when it comes to Tai Chi. Anyway, from the patients I've seen that have done some of those things. But I think it's like anything, whether it's yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Qigong, all these sorts of activities. If we take our diagnosis and the understanding of our own body and we superimpose that on what particular parts of that routine, that exercise, that protocol, or that activity, and we look at it through the lens of our issues or our challenges, then we can cherry pick different parts of those activities that really go alongside and complement what we're doing from a recovery point of view. Many of you guys are in Back in Shape, the premium side of things, and going through this thing, really, I think have a much better understanding, or I'd hope have a much better understanding of your challenges and your unique challenges from a spinal point of view, and what needs to be done to get better. So you will be much better placed to be able to marry up an activity from Qui-Gon with one of the exercises that you're doing in the Back in Shape and say, well, there's a good degree of overlap here, so I will do that for enjoyment, and that's perfectly acceptable. And if you're in doubt, you guys have the Facebook group where you can post those pictures of particular exercises or activities, and we can critique them together and help you guys understand more about what our thoughts are.
Kate also did say that I found the exercise bike really doesn't help. If anything, it makes things worse. Conjuring balance as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's if we need to build up strength, stability, and proprioception, doing an exercise on something which requires none of that. I mean, it may be good, arguably, for some of the cardiovascular side of things, but I don't like patients sitting down for long periods, and using something different would be better.
Okay, Sarah's on. Sarah, our competition winner. She said,
Awesome.
I fall completely into the category of being scared to go back to a loved sport, believing it will aggravate my back. In this case, it's tennis. I love tennis too. How long into phase...
And I'm very bad at tennis.
How long into phase 3 would you recommend before daring the court, or is tennis a bad idea?
I don't think tennis is a bad idea. I would put it under the same category as golf, but maybe there's nuanced ways in which golf's maybe got more challenges in some ways and tennis in others. You're going to be a bit more dynamic on the tennis court. But I would say midway through phase 3, there's no reason you can't go over to the tennis court. Now, the one caveat to that is I don't know how competitive you are and who you're playing with. So if you're playing with someone who's going to have you all over the court, then that's not necessarily a good idea. But going down to the court, it's a lovely day today, although it's getting a bit chilly now this time of the year. Going down to the court and just having a little knock around, nothing to, and that's where there's tennis, and there's having a knock around with a friend, just knocking it over, a few little gentle rallies, and then there's tennis where you're back and forth, left, right, up, down, jumping, all that sort of stuff. But going down to the court and just knocking a few balls over the net very gently, maybe just a couple of forehands for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. I don't see there's any real reason you shouldn't be able to do that in phase 3.
I'm a bit competitive.
Yes, so we need to leave the competitiveness out, but going there and having a little knock around and then leaving it. Don't go there and have a knock around this, Friday, and then get home and go, man, that was so much fun, and then go on Saturday and then go on Sunday, because you're going to get caught out. Go have a good time, knock the ball around a little bit, and then go home, do your towel, do your ice, do your stretching. You know what to do there, and then leave it for a few days, couple of days, and then maybe arrange something for next week and do the same sort of thing. And I'd suggest you do that for a good couple of weeks, because if you've done a couple of 20 minutes just knocking the ball around gently, no games, none of that, just gentle rallies, not running all over the place, just say, look, I can't get that ball, you've hit it all the way over there, what are you playing at? Just a few little gentle rallies to one another for the next couple of weeks. That, I think, will give you the confidence to actually say, hey, this is okay. I will be able to get back to tennis in a more competitive capacity in the future, but I'm comfortable enough to see that I can actually have a little bit of a knock around with a friend, get my heart rate up a little bit, and that be sufficient for the time being. Maybe you haven't been able to do that for a very long time. And that means that if we build that up over the winter, building up our continued progress with Back in Shape, building up those phase 3 exercises, maybe it's workout 1, workout 2, we can really build things even further, so that when it comes around to the new year, new season, I don't know what the tennis season is, but maybe sort of March, April time next year, you're actually going to be able to build it up a little bit more and really have an enjoyable time next year when it's sort of more maybe the season.
Perfect.
So I hope that helps. Gives
Awesome.
you guys a bit of guidance, and that is true. The reason I've gone into detail there is because it could have been tennis, it could have been any other sport or any other activity. There are some we like more than others, but that should hopefully give you guys who don't play tennis but do something else a good idea.
But you suggest introducing that sort of halfway through phase 3.
Yeah, I think you need to really be in phase 2, because the problem is a lot of the phase 2 stuff is we're static and we're very symmetrical. We haven't really moved on to some of those asymmetrical activities. We haven't done any of the rotational stuff or the left to right stuff with the legs upright and weight bearing. So you might find that, you go in and you go do those lunges with a band and you're really, really struggling at those. You maybe can only do 2 or 3 reps. Well, maybe going and do tennis where you're going to be on one leg or the other might not be the right thing. But as we go through and we're doing maybe 4 or 5 sets of 10 with the band on all of the exercises, at that point, being able to just have a little wander around the court shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, awesome. Just a couple more comments.
And obviously we've got towel and ice afterwards.
Yes. Sally said, I've done some Qigong. Is that how you pronounce it?
Qui-Gon.
And yes, I avoid the forward bendy moves for now. Oh,
Smart
I
move.
think Kate and Sally are just having a little bit of a conversation. I'm getting involved. That's awesome, guys. And Pauline on YouTube has just said, thanks. I love the fact that I have this advice on tap. It's amazing. So brilliant. Awesome. I think that's everything for today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, guys. It's really appreciated. And thanks for those questions. They really helped us sort of go into more detail for you guys, and hopefully everyone else that watches these videos, because we do know a lot of people watch these videos after the fact, so they'll really benefit from those questions. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Hopefully you have a great afternoon, and tomorrow we've got a few announcements on the live stream, so do keep an eye out. We're going to be talking about how we're going to be moving things forward after episode 150. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. Have a great day.
Have a great
day. We will
day.
see you tomorrow with another live stream. Thanks so much for joining us on today's video. Hopefully you found it packed full of useful information. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune into some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live, so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.